People will always come to you with great ideas, many of them very well thought out and absolutely worthy. But you can't do everything. And if you want to be able to be a sustainable organization, you need to pick the things that you can be literally world leaders in and give up on anything where at best, even with investment, you'd be okay.
Hello, and welcome to the Entrepreneurship podcast series by UIN. In this episode, Todd Davey, Associate Partner at UIN, spoke with Pascale Quester, Vice-Chancellor and President of Swinburne University of Technology, about how strategic focus, co-creation, innovation, and industry-led research can turn institutional vision into action.
Welcome everybody. My name is Todd Davey. I'm an Associate Professor of Entrepreneurship at the Institute in Telecom Business School. Did I get that pronunciation right, Pascale?
Yeah, that'll do.
Close enough for an Aussie, I think. And I'm also an Associate Partner at UIN. Pascale Quester is the Vice-Chancellor and President of Swinburne University of Technology. She's a respected leader in higher education for over two decades now. She holds degrees from her native France, but also from the US and New Zealand, and a highly cited researcher in consumer behaviour. She's also an officer of the Order of Australia, which is achieved this year. Congratulations on that, Pascale. And also a Knight of the French National Order of Merit, as well as the 2020 recipient of the Career Award for American Marketing Association. Pascale, welcome.
Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I just wanted to start with an interesting, because I guess I was looking at your background, obviously, and I just wanted to understand a little bit more about how somebody with a French origin manages to end up studying in the US, New Zealand, and then Australia, president of an Australian university even. Perhaps you can just talk us through how that occurred.
Well, it's definitely not a straight line, that's for sure. And I guess it has more to do with chaos theory than anything else. I was lucky enough, I did my undergraduate in France in a business school that was well connected with an American university. So I was lucky enough to be able to benefit from a semester abroad and then from a scholarship to go back and do a master's. And then when they offered me a scholarship to do a PhD in Ohio, and this was Columbus, Ohio, my answer at the time was to say that life was too short for 3 more winters in Ohio. And so one of my supervisors, who was a Kiwi, said, if I get you a posting in New Zealand, would you go and do that PhD that I really think is in you? So off I went to New Zealand to do a PhD. And it's only through the process of presenting the result of my PhD at a conference in Australia that I landed a job and actually came to Australia as a Kiwi. So I didn't have to do any of this immigration nightmare because I had a Kiwi passport and I just waved it through. Did basically what I probably never thought I would do, which is go to the dark side. After 10 years climbing the academic ladder, making it to professor at the University of Adelaide, I then was more and more solicited to become an executive, not least because I was a rare woman professor at the University of Adelaide, and also well known for my somewhat orthogonal views that people, I have to give them credit for, were prepared to put into the mix. And so at Adelaide, I became Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, which means that I was in charge of all things international, all things to do with education. Anything except for the research element was under my portfolio. And so it was eminently good preparation for taking the role as the Vice-Chancellor at Swinburne, which was a university I'd been keeping my eyes on because I felt it had the potential to become a different kind of Australian university. And indeed, that's what we've been busy doing in the last 6 years.
And I just wanted to quickly, because we're doing the leadership series here, and I just wanted to reflect quickly on what do you think of the leadership skills that you obviously portrayed that led you to getting those positions in, firstly, the University of Adelaide, and then subsequently getting the offer to lead Swinburne University?
It's gonna sound a little bit flippant, but there's no other Vice-Chancellor with a marketing and consumer behavior background. And it turns out that actually a fair amount of what we do is about understanding the market and offering things that people want, and then communicating about brand and differentiation and value, and then building relationship with business, all of that good stuff that you can find in any good marketing textbook, of which many of those I have written myself. And for some strange reason, people had never heard it. And I was certainly not shy in saying it. And so as a result, people got to say, oh, that's new. And, including the process of co-creation, which I remember in the early 2008, 2010s, co-creation was something that came into the marketing literature for products to be successful, get the consumers to participate into the drawing of it. And I was at Adelaide at the time, and I decided that we would build a learning hub based on that principle, which meant we talked to the students before we talked to the architects. And you have to understand that architects are very keen to build for universities because that's how they win awards. And I couldn't care about the award. I wanted the students to populate the place as soon as it was built. And I wanted them to spend more hours on campus. I wanted a sticky campus. And so I demonstrated how you could get the students to help you design the kind of brief. And you could get the architects only later to realize what the students had said they were missing or would want to have more of on campus in order to stay. And I think it's probably why I'm a VC now, because nobody believed it. Everybody thought, the French woman has gone mad again. And then what happened is that the architects were very offended because they thought they knew better, and they thought that what the students suggested would not win them an award, which obviously nobody other than them cared about. And the day we opened, it was 2011 or 2012, the day we opened the Learning Hub at the University of Adelaide, it was full. And a lot of people say, oh, why aren't you doing an opening? And I asked the students, I said, do you want an opening? And I said, well, you do an opening if you want to. All we want is for the place to be open. And the minute the place was open, there were all those students congregating in all those spaces. There were little project rooms downstairs, and one had been designed to look like a garage, another one looked like your shed, another one. And they were in there and they were happy and they were learning. And then I had the academics saying, oh, can we book some space? Because it's a really good space. And I went, no, this is a learning space, not a teaching space. It's populated by the students, and they learn the way they want to learn. And if you're clever, you will start shaping your assessment and your activity within the course in such a way that they can actually do it in there. But no, you can't book it because it's not for you. And that's the idea of co-creation, right? You co-create with the consumer. You don't co-create with other people. And so when I came to Swinburne, I decided to apply that more broadly. We co-create with students, but we also ended up co-creating with staff. And guess what? It works. Who knew?
Well,
Who knew? Consumer behavior and marketing is useful in universities as well. So there you go. That's the case study of how if you trust somebody to be good at what they do, which in my case was the consumer behavior and understanding of the meaning of brand and all the rest of it, why would I try to be like another Vice-Chancellor who doesn't have that background? I think the key to leadership is draw on your strengths and then leverage it and put it at the service of the mission that you're trying to pursue. And there's no reason why it shouldn't work.
There's some great insights you provided there, but at the same time, you landed at Swinburne University during the time of COVID. Talk about getting thrown in the deep end. Maybe you could just talk about some of the challenges that presented.
It was really funny because people outside of Australia don't realize just how, in Melbourne in particular, this was the longest lockdown in the world, right? And I had decided to travel from Adelaide to Melbourne, me and my car and my dog and my partner. And it was like the first 5 minutes of a zombie movie because all the cars are going in the opposite direction at fast speed and we're the one going in there. And by the time I arrived, and I wanted, the motivation was I need to be there so that I experience the same thing that staff do. I can't stay in Adelaide and talk to people on Zoom or Teams while they are in the middle of it. I wanted to be with them to live what they lived. And guess what? They had left Melbourne. They were all gone. So they literally, because most people in Melbourne have a country house, Bayside or in the Dandenong or whatever. And I was the only mug in town because everybody else had left. So that was one sobering thought. And then the second sobering thought is that when the government, which was the government of Victoria, just went completely feral on the kind of control bit. And they decided I had a random rental that was outside of the 5-kilometer radius from the campus. And then I was told that a Vice-Chancellor is not an essential worker. Who knew? So I was cooped
Apparently not.
I was cooped up in a random rental, forbidden to come on campus. In any case, nobody was there on campus because they'd all choofed off. So, in terms of challenge, it was interesting. But I decided to actually make it the demonstration of why we needed to change. The fact that universities needed to change was patently obvious to everyone. But I also drew from this the absolute conviction that people and technology needed to work together to create a better future. And the case was made every day when people could still work, when they could still talk to family, when they could still connect with the rest of the world, even though they were not allowed to go out. And so the case was made for change, and the case was made for people and technology working together. So I did the only smart thing that you could do. I used a technology platform and invited everyone to be part of the conversation about what we would be like in the future, because whatever strategic plan had existed before was clearly not going to be relevant. And I got close to 80% of staff participating, which to this day, if I had tried to do
That's
that
astonishing.
if I tried to do that with town hall meetings and surveys and all the rest of it, I would have heard from the 10% of very loud voices. I would have heard particularly from the Brahmins of the system, the research professors, and they would have been telling me how it's done. And then the junior teaching staff would not have had a voice. The professional staff would not have had a voice. The indigenous staff would not have had a voice, whereas on the technology platform, I was really at liberty to give due consideration to every comment, regardless of where it came from. And of course, I didn't have the benefit of AI then, so I literally digested over 5,000 pages of written document and then came up with a strategy which I wanted to not be like any other strategy, because we were at a time that was unprecedented in so many ways. And so instead of having a long-winded document that talked about the virtues of this and the great glory of that, we decided to have 4 moonshots to be Starship Swinburne, and we were unashamedly not going to try to be like any other university. And those 4 moonshots, which initially people thought, oh, there's a French woman has gone crazy again, they actually really embraced it, and it became part of the vocabulary, it became part of the belief system, it became part of the value system. We were one Swinburne. I never wanted more Brahmins and more Dalits, like professors, lecturers, professional staff, all of us one Swinburne, trying to land those 4 moonshots, that every learner would get a work experience, every graduate would get a job, every industry partner would get a tech solution and a workforce to make it work. And we would be the prototype of the university of the future rather than the imitation of the universities of the past. And you know what? This was in an institution where people had lost the ability to dream big. And so they kind of thought, how are we going to get there? But, I kept on telling them, Kennedy, when he said the moon, the moonshot, he was very clear. We don't know how to do it, but we're going to do it together. And the fact that we landed it was actually essential for the work that occurred in the last couple of years when we decided on the next strategic plan, which was, now Ad Astra, because when you've landed on the moon, you're free from gravity, so you can go to the stars. So we're now going to the stars, and the plan to 2030 is actually similarly using the power of storytelling and of metaphor. And we are going to be chasing quantum leaps, which my physicist colleagues tell me are very tiny little things, but for us are very transformational. So, a personalized pathway for every learner to succeed, and creating the industries of the future, and dealing with the world as our campus, and leaning in technology, using it, demonstrating it, calling it out when it's not used properly, using it in the way we teach, in the way we administer ourselves, in the way that we relate, because really the quantum leap one of a personalized educational journey to success could not be achieved without technology. And I should disclose that in that co-creation exercise, I included the students, I included our overseas campuses, I included our industry partners, and I could invite as many people to write as many pages as they wanted because I was using AI. I was demonstrating how we can use AI to extract themes from lots of written pages and then reflect them back and have forums. And we had actually a great expo in the Sky Lounge where people could actually react and respond. So we validated and reflected back. And by the time we came up with, in the end, it was 4 quantum leaps, everybody was on board and people are already talking about it. They've completely forgotten about the moonshots. Everybody's excited about the quantum leaps, and everybody is really thinking about what does it mean for the way that I work and how do I bring that vision to life.
Yeah, I think it was a brilliant analogy to use that moonshots. I guess it makes it very visual what we're trying to achieve and where we're going. I guess I just wanted to quickly understand from your perspective, because Swinburne at the time when you brought that in was experiencing some difficulties, as well as the university sector generally. You've also mentioned that universities need to change. So perhaps you could just set the scene for why you needed, or thought you thought you wanted to bring in something quite advanced in terms of we want to make a significant leap forward.
So there was what I consider to be this false equation in people's mind that bigger was better. So the model in Australia, and it was in no small way driven by the fact that research costs money, teaching generates revenue, particularly international teaching and education delivers revenue. And so you have to subsidize the research that you do, and there's a kind of virtuous cycle because the more you climb in the ranking and the more international students you'll get and all the rest of it. But as a result, most of the universities were chasing more and more students to do more and more research. And I thought that actually one of our strengths here was that we were a dual sector. So much like some of the European university, we go from the vocational and practical education right up to the PhD, which is a fabulous thing for industry to talk to us about, because when they talk about the human capital needs, we literally can assist with apprentices and trades, and then people with diplomas, and then people with bachelors, and then people with master, whatever. So I thought, reflecting on the structure of this sector, that there would have to be a better way, which consisted of being really excellent at fewer things instead of trying to be good at everything, which is a punishment. You have to just grow to feed that beast. Now, obviously, this is not a popularity contest. When I started saying things like, we're not going to teach languages anymore. And people say, oh, shock horror, you don't like the humanities and all the rest of it. And my response was always, look, we can have this conversation in French or in Spanish. And, it's not like I'm against languages. It's just that this is not who we are. We're a university of technology. So therefore, there are 8 other universities in Victoria. If people want to learn Italian, go for it. But you don't need us to do it. You need someone to do it so that you can study it, but it doesn't need to be us. I repeated the exercise when I was asked to continue to fund the Institute for Circus Art. Now, fantastic institution, great performance. And the first thing I did was to go and talk to them, saying, tell me about the circus of the future. Are you going to use augmented reality? Are you going to use robotic animals? Tell me what the circus of the future looks like with technology. And they went, oh, no, we like trapeze, and we're very good with our clowns, and we love doing the traditional circus art. And I said, great, I'll help you do that somewhere else, because you're not going to do that at Swinburne. It stops now. And I think that's the strength of a good strategy, is that you use it as an Excalibur. People will always come to you with great ideas, many of them very well thought out and absolutely sort of worthy. But you can't do everything. And if you want to be able to be a sustainable organization, you need to pick the things that you can be literally world leaders in. And you need to give up on anything where at best, even with investment, you'd be okay. So for us, it was space and the space industry. It was energy transition and sustainability. And it was medtech. Because in Victoria, there are a few really world-leading universities in fundamental medical research, but they will make somebody's life better in 50 years. Once somebody has thought about how to leverage those fundamental new knowledges into something that make a difference. We have engineers and designers working with people who are trying things now, applied research that literally slow down the effect of Alzheimer on people's brains through the use of electronic and electric impulses, things that assuage chronic pain through devices that are currently experimental, but that we are hoping to design in a way that they can be easy to wear, easy to monitor. So we are at the nexus of where technology and engineering can meet fundamental science and blue sky research in order to devise the devices that will make people better. And that's people and technology have to work to make a better world. And this is how we do it. Now, the other stuff, not so much. It's not that it doesn't need to get done. It's just that it doesn't need to get done by us.
Ready to unlock the entrepreneurial potential of your students, staff, and institution? Our training programs help you embed entrepreneurial thinking across education and research. Whether you're supporting academics, running incubators, or shaping university strategy, our courses give you the insights to make entrepreneurship thrive. Explore upcoming programs at uiin.org/training and empower the next generation of innovators.
And I wanted to pick up because of the third moonshot that you named, which is that every university partner gets a tech solution. I wanted to pick up two parts of that. Firstly, you talk about a partner. I just wanted to understand a little bit more about how you see that. How does a university partnership work as opposed to a transactional relationship? Mm-hmm. And then how do you ensure that everyone gets a tech solution in that scenario?
One of the very successful things that we have done very often when you start acquiring money and you've got a pot of money, it makes all researchers very excited. And then they go on whatever it is that they wanted to do in the first place. One of the very important steps in order to secure partnership is to listen to what the problem is that the industry partner is trying to solve. Then define it and reflect it back so that they agree that, because sometimes they're not very good at defining the problem, and so they need some assistance to shape what it is that would actually help. And then they need to see some progress. The idea of, I'll give you a PhD student and see you in 4 years, they'll have it cracked, is of no value at all to an industry partner. So being aware of what the deliverables need to be and being really clear on what the solutions might look like is really important. One of the things that we have done very successfully on the energy transition is I worked with the French government and the Australian government to create a Franco-Australian Centre for Energy Transition. And I did that because the French are more agnostic in the kind of source of energies that they use. And in Australia, we're not allowed to use nuclear, which means you can't really do green hydrogen if you don't have another form of, so there was a benefit in having a more agnostic palette of things that could actually be researched. And then the funding from each of the government was really for us to be something that is not a research center, but to be a kind of a collaborative workplace. So industry and university, not just us, we are the host. But we actually have a building that we call the Swinburne Switch, where we've got collaborative space, where we invite other universities to come and be with us too. And it's been operating for 3 years, and we're now at the point where most of the projects that we fund get at least 50 and sometimes 70% funding from industry, because they know that they are going to get value and they know when they're going to get that value. And it's not all PhD students, by the way. Sometimes it's a third-year engineering project, and sometimes it's something else. But the challenge for me as the chair of the steer core was always to look at those projects, some of them fabulously smart. But if industry hadn't put money in it, you'd go, who have you been talking to about this? Because if you haven't found somebody that is as excited as you are and somebody who sees as much value in doing it as you do, then I'm not putting 1 cent on the table. You're going to have to find someone who thinks it's such a great idea for their business to do it, that they'll be willing to put at least 50 cents for every 50 cents output. And then we can think about whether or not we can leverage it in a different way, which has been sometimes for researchers a little bit abrasive, because they thought, this is a brilliant project. And of course it was. But if the industry doesn't see it, go and ask another research grant body. This is not it. So we're trying to kind of really show that basically for our applied researchers, they can eat what they can kill, right? If they don't go and get the business, they won't get the funding. It's as easy as that.
I love the expression. I'm just picturing how that goes down when those communicating to a professor or a researcher. That's one thing I wanted to pick up, because entrepreneurial leadership, and I think there's no doubt that listening to you, anyone just listening to what you've said until now would say that you're an entrepreneurial leader. I wanted to just touch upon the fact that it also involves focus and execution. You've talked about that a number of times. I mean, you talked about any research outside of those 3 areas. That's interesting, but that's not for us. I think there was also something you did that you communicated to me one time, that if a PhD took longer than the 3 years scheduled, then it couldn't be included on an academic's work time, and then also faculty restructuring and things like that. So I guess I just wanted to talk a little bit about that. That's the unseen side of entrepreneurial leadership, I think, is the ability to be selective, aligned, and disciplined in the delivery. And I just wanted to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, well, this is also something that you have to have a tough skin and you've got to be willing to be unpopular. You know, me closing the circus school was like me shooting Bambi. I got no love for that, except when we then were able to double our investment in the Keck Observatory, where we are the only Australian university to have the benefit of having equipment and observation capability on the top of a volcano in Hawaii. All of a sudden, people said, so this is why we had to shoot Bambi because we can do that. So, those choices, and I really believe in the power of clarity, that if you actually say, I'm not doing that because I'm a meat person, I'm saying that because I want to say a more emphatic yes to the things that make us brilliant. And some people have actually understood the message that if they want to do research, which is their hobby, they can do it if they find somebody to fully pay, not just for the research, but for their time. In other words, if people can actually carve a value proposition to an external stakeholder, it gives them a little bit of leeway. They may not be in space research, but as long as it's about tech and people, there is relevance to it. It's just they won't get money unless they can get it from an industry partner. Now, you're right in saying that it is much more than just a transactional thing. It has to be a culture you create. So one of the things that we did here was that I think we're the only Australian university to do it, we introduced a 10% innovation allocation in a workload. And that meant that we also introduced an assessment of innovation in the promotion system. So all of a sudden, you're changing the rules, right? And after the first period of time where people were trying to tell me that growing carrots in a community garden was innovative, and I went, no, that's not going to count. But people really embraced it because I'm quite agnostic. And whether they innovated in their teaching or whether they innovated in their research, I really didn't care. I just wanted them to exercise that muscle. So we had, and I've got a great vice president of innovation and entrepreneurship. So we had a program that was available for staff. And if they wanted to kind of think about a startup, then they could use the time and go through the innovation studio to see whether their idea had merit and then whether it had a market. And then if it had both merit and a market, we actually equipped ourselves with a venture capital capability. And I convinced my council to allow us to carve out some money from the balance sheet so that we could actually put money into some of those great ideas. And if we put money, we're much more likely to get external money to be invested. So now we've got more startup per capita than any other universities because it's in the culture. And we have, I think it was over 1,000 students volunteering to do some entrepreneurship units into their program because we don't ask them to choose to study entrepreneurship. We offer it as something that they can do as well. And then if they catch the bug, and then if they want to do more, we scaffold whatever it is that they need to do. And in fact, the Swinburne switch, there's a whole floor that is dedicated to startup on energy transition. Because I don't want a cohort of graduates who are all moaning and bemoaning the future of the planet. I want people who are going to turn their sleeves up and start thinking about what it is that they can do as an engineer, as an apprentice and tradesperson, as a business person. What is it that they're going to do to fix it?
I think I just want to pick up a question from somebody in the conversation today, which is Martin Blenel. He's asked, do you provide any training for researchers who you give such tough love? And also, how do you get them to understand what a value proposition is, and also just how to listen as much as anything?
So we recognize that if you want people to try things, you've got to allow them to fail as well. So we created I'm very proud of this. We created the Vice-Chancellor's Award for Failing Forward. And initially, the first time we had that, I thought I'm going to have to nominate myself because who's going to be crazy enough to nominate themselves? But actually, the first year was only team that actually applied. Nobody individually applied for the Fail Forward Award. But then people started to get it, that we wanted to learn. And we learn, I think, probably more from failure than we do from success. So we recognize that people can fail. We want them to share both the failure and the learnings from the failure. And surprisingly, a very large number of academics said, okay, so you're talking about this innovation thing. I'm not sure I have the tools, so get me through a program. And in the first iteration, we had 300 academics doing that training. And as I said, we've only seen more staff coming up saying, I've got this idea, can you help me? And then, of course, many of them, it's a great idea, but there's no market. So you don't have a startup if you've got just an idea and no market. People understand what it's about, and they are very willing to get their toes in the water.
We have another question from Danielle Clark. She's very excited about innovation being included in the academic workload. She just wanted to understand a little bit more about the remaining split of the workload model. Is it as in, I think she's put here 40, 40, 10, 10? Maybe you can explain that a little.
I am of the view that the rigidity of the workload model is probably the single most paralyzing force in a university. I am just so over it. We have as an institution the mission to develop new knowledge and to educate people. So, of course, there is also the additional kind of how we operate and administer ourselves, etc. But for some reason, people think that everybody should be the same and everybody should be 40, 40, 20. Well, I don't know about you. In real life, people are not identical. People are better at some things than others. And I am of the view, and unfortunately, in my university, this was the case, that a lot of people move from that to a place where you get more status by doing more research, and people judge each other's quality on how far they can go into doing more research. And I just detest the notion that you do teaching because you're not successful at research. In no other job do you qualify for something by just being really crap at something else. It makes no sense. So my view would be that as a collective of really smart people, we should be able to balance out how the teaching and the research is done. I happen to believe that some of the best teachers are some of our best researchers because, I used to have really high evaluation in my teaching, and I was the one that published the most in my school. But that comes from being passionate, right? If you love your stuff, you're going to do it, you're going to publish it, and you're going to talk about it in a way that is infectious, right? So I don't subscribe to the quarantining of people, but there are some people who are incredibly good researchers. And if they're not very good at teaching, we should give them a chance to be doing more of this incredible research, but they don't get to keep the credit individually. It is for the team that they succeed. Because the problem is that the people who do research only, they're working on their CV and then they're going to try and go somewhere else. So I've always said to my star, and I've got some real stars in terms of research, this is for Swinburne. This is not you as an individual. We give you more time to do research. We want the benefit and the credit and the ranking and all the rest of it. But I am equally in awe of those people who are such great education, that people who are lacking in confidence or don't quite know whether they are cut out for an academic qualification or whatever, they are supported, they are developed, they are grown. And I have as much respect for an education-only person as I have for a research-only person because they are excellent at what they do. I completely understand and respect that there are some people who are good at both, and I just will not stand for the people who are good at neither, because that's actually the game that is being played in universities. I'm not good at research. Give me teaching. And then I'll just, be a bad teacher and traumatize students? I mean, that's just not allowed. If you're not a good educator, I don't want you to teach at all.
Now, Pascale, we have proven over the years that we could talk forever about these sort of topics. Unfortunately, we're getting towards the end of the chat. But I just wanted to get you to reflect on perhaps the biggest concern, but also the biggest opportunity that you see that universities have.
So in Australia now, so globally, the status and the trust that universities have changes quite dramatically. I mean, one of the reasons why I like going back to France is not just to catch up with family, but it's really nice to be given respect by people because you work at a university. In Australia, you almost have to apologize for working at a university. I mean, if I were a footballer, boy, I would be a heck of a lot more respected. So there is that element of context, and it does explain, but doesn't excuse the fact that our government is completely remiss when it comes to the necessary investment to basically create the future. You create the future with two things, the technology of the future and then the workforce of the future. My university does that in spade. And yet, unless we get students to come from overseas, and to me, the students that we want to attract from overseas are people who are talented, and we want them here for their talent, not for their money. But the university system in Australia has become so dependent on international students' revenue that I think they've lost the plot. and they have become a very easy target for government to criticize. And so the headwind that I predict for the system here in Australia is that neither side of politics is supportive. None of them think long term, which is what universities do. I mean, 3 years is the time between election in Australia, and it's the time that one student can take full time to do a bachelor. It's nothing, right? So that notion that we are, I mean, in the case of Swinburne, we are succeeding despite of the government, despite of the public opinion. We're doing it because it's the right thing to do and because we're very successful at developing our students and giving them opportunities and then resolving some challenges for our industry partners. But we do this by being incredibly dedicated and motivated in doing the things that we do, because we do it in the midst of continuous critical and nasty comments from the public.
And the opportunity?
So to me, the opportunity is the kind of the demonstration of the fact that a university can be so successful like we are without being a bigger thing that looks like Oxford. The fact that we are creating the prototype of what a university needs to be in the future, the fact that AI was a really good example. 30% of the academics, their instinctive response was say, we're going to ban it because people can cheat. My challenge to them was to say, if you assess people in a way that can actually be improved by using AI, then you're using the wrong assessment. I'm banning. You will not be allowed to ban AI, because if you do, you are actually shortchanging the students. They need to learn to think and to learn to analyze and to be creative in an environment where AI will be everywhere. Resistance is useless in this instance. How about we kind of equip people to be critical of AI, to understand what it can do and certainly also understand what it can't do? And then how about we sort of write the policy that enables that to be a reality for society at large? Run into the fire and just get a solution rather than run away thinking that somebody else is going to do the job.
I love that. I think it's a great place to finish. Running into the fire. Pascale Quester, who is the president of Swinburne University. We've been talking about how to build a more innovative university. We have at UIN training sessions coming up in September, developing strategic partnerships, which is very in line with the conversation we've had today. Pascale Quester, I wanted to thank you profusely for your time today. You've given us so many different insights about what it is to be entrepreneurial in your leadership. And yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Always enjoy the conversation with you on that.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion. Follow UIN on LinkedIn, and if you are enjoying our podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate and review in your podcast platform of choice to help other people find this content too.